Rhonda Buis, and this is my husband Fred. And we have 2 boys. We actually had 2 boys. Our oldest son, 16 years old, passed away from seizure disorder or autism that was caused from his vaccines. And our 14-year-old that we have now, he has been destroyed by his vaccines as well. And we've made it our mission to try to find as much help as possible for these kids. And unfortunately, we don't have our oldest son with us anymore.
Okay, guys, I'm going to take you right back, okay? I'm going to take you back to when you were thinking about having children. What was your thinking on vaccines then?
Well, we were pretty ignorant about vaccines at the time. I never really expected to have children, but after 7 years of marriage, Eric, our oldest, came along, and I was just smitten. I just fell in love with that little baby, and he was the most precious, sweetest little baby I've ever known. We wanted to do the very best for him. We were close to Loma Linda University Medical Center, and a lot of medical people in our family. And of course, vaccines were just part of their lives, and we had no idea that we
didn't want to get measles, we didn't want to get mumps, we didn't want chicken pox. It was like, well, we don't want those childhood diseases, but we felt that they were the professionals that would handle it, just as we have our own expertise in our work, that people pay for our expertise. That's what we trusted.
So Eric was running a little behind with his normal vaccine schedule, so he received his 18-month vaccines at about 2 years of age. And shortly afterward, he started having seizures,
Now, do you remember what he had at that 2-year catch-up?
It was the normal 18-month group, which is MMR and
DTP, Convex, varicella, hepatitis B. That was the scheduling.
Both children were on the same schedule and got the same vaccines. At the time, no one indicated that these seizures had anything to do with the vaccinations. We didn't even
or with autism
dream
at all or anything.
that it could have been related to the vaccines at the time. So,
but then, I was going to say our youngest son, when he was born, that's when we really put 2 and 2 together, because his vaccines were given at 18 months, and they gave him MMR, DTP, Convex, varicella, Hep B all at one time. And that same day, our boy spiked a fever. I have a photographic history of him. I'm a graphic designer, so I took a ton of pictures and video. He spiked a fever, his entire countenance drooped, and he started to tremor. And shortly thereafter, he's flapping his hands, he's screaming violently, he's in the floor. He had stopped all of his language. He couldn't say mama, daddy. It was like his soul was extracted out of his body and left us with a shell that we had no way to help. It was just, we couldn't help him. Everything hurt. It just appeared like the same pain was for everything, if he hurt himself or if he needed something. And that caused us to look back at the records of our older boy, who was still having seizures, and they were putting him on more and more anticonvulsants, which were making him sicker and sicker and sicker. And all of this, we had 2 perfectly developed boys, high APGAR scores, and it was like it just crumbled.
Can we talk about your boys? Let's talk about Eric first.
Sure.
What was he like before he crashed on these vaccines into seizures?
You want to tell that?
Well, he has 22 cousins, and Rhonda's mother commented that of all the children, he was the brightest, he had the longest attention span, he was a sweet, sweet little kid.
Amazing.
Amazing boy. At 2 years of age, Eric could name all the presidents by their photograph. At 2 years of age.
He could count in Spanish and English to what, 50?
To 50, in English to 100. He was such a bright, sweet, charming little child. We were just
That's why we just wanted to have another one. He was just so cute.
Those first 2 years with Eric were the greatest
years of our lives.
years of our lives.
It's tragic. So, okay, let's come on to about Eric. So he crashed after these, starts having seizures. Describe the seizures and how, because let's describe the seizures in his life leading up to 16 years old.
Well, he had 5 hospitalizations in 2 months at Loma Linda, and every single time they did the same tests. They did EEGs, MRIs, the spinal. So he was. We'll never forget. They put you in kind of a cage type.
Babies, young children.
And there was a point when he just wanted to be with us, and Fred crawled into the cage just to hold him, just to
he had
give him
IVs coming out of all 4 limbs. He was just really beat up by.
What age are you talking about?
Right.
2 years. The first 2 to 3, from age 2 to 3, we really fought the seizures at the hospital level.
And at the end of the day, after all was said and done, there was a shrug of the shoulder, and they said, that he has temporal lobe epilepsy, or seizure disorder. They said it stems from the temporal lobe, it's generalized, and they said our next course of action will be to cut open the brain, pull it back, put electrodes on it, see if there's any hot spots, and if there are, then we can scoop those out. And at that point, we felt that we had done enough there, and enough damage, and the idea of cutting open my son's brain at that point was just not even an option at that point. And I said, we're done here, we are done here.
So we took him home. He remained on anticonvulsants for quite a few more years, but using natural treatments, we were able to get him off the anticonvulsants, which really helped him tremendously.
Took him off of everything.
And by the time he was 16, his seizures had decreased so much that we had him out of our bedroom for the first time in 16 years. He was on his own, and we had a monitor on him. And he was doing quite well, and he was having just a few seizures a week.
He went from having about 12 seizures every day to where he was having one every 2 months after we started detoxing.
At the very best. Yeah.
So, just summarising just that up, healthy boy, vaccines, make him crash, he has seizures, then they just give him endless psychotropic drugs.
Right, but we stopped that early on.
Which
too.
makes him worse.
Yes.
So then when you start to take control and push back on the mainstream medical profession, your son starts to improve.
Oh, absolutely.
You hear that well, people?
Yes,
he did.
By the time he was 14, he was really thriving.
He was.
And he was such a social person, and we had great expectations for Eric to recover, possibly not live a normal life, but to have a very productive and happy life.
But on top of all of this, as a parent, and you're battling these health issues, you're also battling school districts that are wanting to take your kids out of school.
We were in court. We had attorneys at our school district so angry with us they were harassing us.
And why were they
day.
angry? What did you do wrong?
Because we were fighting for
to keep a behavioral ABA program in place.
Right.
And so we had to fight. There were 17 meetings where people were sitting around the table saying we want to take away the existing program, which was like life to these kids. And we want to just put an aid with them for a few hours a day. And of course, we know our children, that would have never happened. And so we fought that battle, and we were able to come to an agreement. But if it took, literally, it was a bloody battle. It was years.
It was years.
Documentation, books, binders, a 52-hour-a-week one-on-one ABA therapy.
And Eric burned up $1 million health insurance policy within that first year, and was cut off at that point. He burned up a lifetime $1 million policy.
So when you get to your limit, they just chuck you out.
They cut us out, and we sold things that I inherited from my parents. We spent over $1 million of our own money to try to save these kids.
And then, of course, taking them to every autism doctor that was on the cutting edge of everything. We tried to reverse this as soon as possible because we heard, of course, that getting right on these things, would be most effective. Which, you start out with the gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free diet. You go on further, and we were at the initial. All of these initial meetings where people were just grasping at straws to try to see what we could do to hold these kids together.
Did hyperbaric oxygen treatments. We bought a chamber, brought it into our house. The kids did 160 dives.
They said, the latest thing is nicotine therapy.
We tried nicotine therapy, Ovament therapy.
It's horrible.
But the important thing here is that 16, he was improving better than he had done.
Yes.
At the beginning.
Yes.
Well, we started to detox him, and that was through a lot. Chelation helped my younger son gain part of his vocabulary back, and that was getting the heavy metals out of his body.
It helped Eric with seizures as well.
Yes, but my youngest son, according to Dr. Bradstreet, was that his had the highest aluminum levels that he had ever seen in a kid. And they were lead off the chart. Mercury. Well, mercury is the last one to leave. Flame retardant. Yeah. And of course, we became number one. I think it was 115 and 116 on the National Vaccine Compensatory Act. And they threw it out when the study was done. They said vaccines do not cause autism, and they said they wanted us to sign a paper and a release saying that we understood this, and of course we never signed. I will never sign that. We saw what happened to our children. I can only speak for ourselves, but now that we see all the other voices coming forward, and people need to listen.
The saddest thing of all is it's the same story over and over again. Yours just has a more tragic ending. Can we talk about Eric and what happened to him and why he's not with us today?
Well, I said he was doing so well, we moved him into his own bedroom.
He had been in our bedroom in bunk beds for
His entire life.
15 years,
Yes.
15 and a half years, so that every time a seizure would happen, we would be right there with him. And if it was amazing how sometimes if we just held him through the night, his seizures would go away. And both of us are self-employed, so we had to be up and working, and this would happen sometimes, all through the night. But he got to the point.
But we had a monitor
Where
on him, and he was doing very well. But one night he had a seizure that was absolutely silent. We never heard a thing.
The monitor is not a good idea, in my opinion. It flipped him on his tummy, and when Fred went to wake him up, we have a
seizure. He flipped over during the seizure.
And I got up to make breakfast that morning because I have a bed and breakfast.
He
and
suffocated.
He suffocated
in his bedding.
And I heard the screams of Fred saying something's terribly wrong with Eric, and I knew what had happened at that point. And I called 911, of course, that I will never forget those fire trucks coming into our
I
property.
did CPR on him.
Hour and a half,
till
trying
they
to revive
came,
him.
and long afterward.
And he was gone. He had been gone for 2 hours. He was still warm, and he was warm because the seizure made him warm under the covers. So, and that was the end of Eric. And all of that fight left with him. At first, we mourned normalcy. We mourned having the kids that we were meant to have, the kids that had life and vitality. We mourned that for so long, and we tried. It was
We
fought it. And now we just mourn our son. We would take him back at any price, any cost. And I just wish we had him. He can't be here to speak out, and neither can my other son that's living that doesn't have a voice, because that's been robbed from him. And that little boy, the 14-year-old right now, he cannot convey with words what's wrong. So he lives as if he's a stroke victim, trapped inside his body. And if there's some problem or some pain, he cannot vocalize what's going on.
He has not spoken since the day after he was vaccinated.
Until we started to chelate.
A few very
we have
faint words.
Limited words, but we did get some words back, which we're very happy
So he
with.
was speaking a few limited words before.
How old was he when he was? Beautiful language.
Oh, he could.
Before.
Well, typical
yes.
mama, daddy,
At
baba.
18 months.
You know,
He had
18
normal
months.
18-month
Our
language.
children met all their milestones until that time.
And he doesn't speak as much at 14 years as he did at 18 months.
That's right.
So he's 14 now, and of course he can't speak, and so you can't. So when
can-
Eric passed, it must have been horrific for him.
Oh,
We have no idea what he went through. Once in a while, he will say Eric, and we know that he's
breathily,
thinking,
he sees a picture and he'll say, Eric,
Yeah,
Eric.
yeah.
And a lot of times, if he shows frustration, he'll bite his wrist. He's bitten at 2 points where it's so painful. He doesn't. It's like that's his
It's all
mechanism to not lash
calloused,
out.
yeah.
He bites himself in his pain that he feels inside. In the quiet hours of the night, when you can talk to him, you get feedback from him that you can see that he is in there, and he cannot express himself or tell us anything. So, what happens to these children now? Whose responsibility is this? What's going to happen when we die? Who's going to take and love this child as much as we do? What are the plans for that? And at the current rate of autism, if this is happening, who's going to take care of all of these children that it's going to happen to? If it's not the vaccines, and I really question for people to stand up and say what it is, because I saw it happen before our very eyes.
We saw it happen, and we've been to many autism conferences, and well over half, probably 60 to 70% of the parents that we met at autism conferences could relate their children's issue to their vaccinations.
And to tell you the truth, it's only now that we've really have been able to talk about it, because all of our efforts, everything has been to help the two boys. It hasn't been to be, any kind of thing that we went to speak. We just couldn't put energy into it because of the enormity to be able to just function, to take care of these kids. It's unbelievable.
It's
Unbelievable.
overwhelming emotionally and financially, in every way. It changed our lives in every possible way.
I want to tell you, though, that when my youngest son was diagnosed, and they had us go to Kaiser in Riverside, and they diagnosed him, the doctor, I will never forget that day. I didn't know anything about autism, but he said, it was so callous. I'll never forget, we knew something was desperately wrong, and he said, well, I want you to know, your son has autism. You're going to wish that he had never been born. He actually used these words. He said, when he gets to be about 12, 13, 14, you're going to want to institutionalize him. So sorry. And those were his words. And he patted me on the head.
Walked out.
and we got into the elevator, and I remember at this point I'm angry and passionately sad that my son's not with us, but I'm angry. But at the time I sobbed, I cried in that elevator. But I remember when that elevator hit the bottom level to go out, Fred said, "Rhonda, that man is not going to determine the fate of these kids. We are going to fight this." And that's when that bell rang on that elevator. Was